Justin's alarm buzzed softly at 6 a.m., pulling him from a deep, dreamless sleep. He reached out with a groggy hand, fumbling to silence it before rolling over in bed. As his hand brushed across the cool sheets beside him, he realized Ariana was already up. He sighed, stretching out the stiffness in his muscles, remnants from yesterday's workout, and then swung his legs over the edge of the bed. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted down the hallway, leading him to the kitchen like a beacon. When he walked in, he found Ariana standing by the counter, her back to him, dressed in a sharp business suit that outlined her figure perfectly. She was focused on her phone, scrolling through emails with a frown creasing her forehead. "Good morning, babe," Justin said, stepping up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close for a quick kiss on the cheek. The fabric of her suit was cool against his bare chest. "You're up early." "Good morning, Justin," Ariana replied, a brief smile flickering across her face, but it didn't reach her eyes. She put her phone down, focusing on stirring her coffee. "Big day at the office. Lots of meetings. You know how it is." "Yeah, I hear you." Justin let her go and grabbed a mug from the cupboard. "I've got a packed day myself. Heading to Boston in a few hours for that client meeting. Shouldn't be gone too long, though." Ariana nodded, adjusting the collar of her blouse in the kitchen window's reflection. "How long will you be gone?" "Just a couple of nights. Back by Friday evening." He poured his coffee, taking a long sip as the warmth spread through him. "You sure you're okay with me being away?" Ariana turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "Of course, Justin. It's just work. I'll be fine. You don't need to worry." Her tone was light, but something felt off. Justin couldn't pinpoint it, but there was a hesitation in her voice, a slight detachment that made him pause. He studied her for a moment, watching as she busied herself with putting away dishes, her movements a little too precise, too practiced. He shook off the feeling, deciding it was just the stress of their busy schedules. They'd both been swamped with work lately, which had left little time for each other. He made a mental note to plan something special when he got back. Maybe a weekend getaway or a nice dinner, just the two of them. Leaning in, Justin kissed her again, this time lingering a bit longer. "I'll miss you," he said softly. Ariana's lips curved into a small smile as she kissed him back. "I'll miss you too." Her words were gentle, but as she pulled away, Justin noticed the way her gaze dropped to the floor for a split second, the flicker of something in her eyes. Was it guilt? Sadness? He couldn't tell, but it left a gnawing unease in his gut. Still, he pushed the doubt aside. They had been married for 18 years, and while there had been the usual ups and downs, he trusted Ariana. They had built a solid life together, with shared dreams and future plans. There was no reason to believe anything was amiss. Justin finished his coffee in silence, listening to the rhythmic ticking of the kitchen clock. As he glanced at the time, he realized he needed to get moving if he was going to make his flight. He quickly grabbed his suitcase from the bedroom, double-checking to make sure he had everything he needed. Ariana stood by the door, watching him with a distant expression. "Safe travels," she said as he pulled on his coat. "Thanks." Justin gave her one last kiss, this one light and quick. "I'll call you when I land." "Okay," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She lingered by the door as he walked out, her eyes following him until he disappeared down the driveway. Justin's day at work was a whirlwind of activity. Meetings, phone calls, and emails blurred together as he tried to stay focused, but his mind kept drifting back to Ariana. There was an uneasy feeling gnawing at him, a sense that something wasn't right. He shook it off, attributing it to the stress of his upcoming trip. As Justin drove to the airport, he tried to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. It was probably just the stress of the trip, the early hour, or maybe even his own overactive imagination. But as much as he tried to convince himself that everything was fine, the seed of doubt that had been planted continued to grow, its roots digging deeper into his mind. He turned on the radio, hoping the music would drown out his thoughts, but even as the familiar tunes filled the car, the feeling of unease lingered, whispering that something was about to change, something he wasn't ready for. And he was starting to relax when his phone buzzed with a message. Glancing at it briefly, he noticed it was from an unknown number. His curiosity peaked, He tapped to open the message. Hey Justin, I don't know how to tell you this, but you need to know. Your wife is at home right now, but she's not alone. She's with her boss. I'm really sorry. Justin's heart skipped a beat. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he had just read. Was this some kind of joke? He felt his chest tighten as a wave of anxiety washed over him. He quickly pulled over to the side of the road, his fingers trembling as he typed a response. Who is this? What are you talking about? The seconds dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. His phone buzzed again, and he snatched it up, reading the reply with mounting dread. I'm one of her colleagues. I don't want to get involved, but I couldn't just stay quiet. I've seen the way they act around each other at the office. I've heard the rumors. And today, well, I followed her. They're at your house, Justin. I'm sorry. Justin felt as if the air had been sucked out of the car. His breathing grew shallow, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. This couldn't be real. Not Ariana. Not the woman he had loved and trusted for years. But the seed of doubt that had been planted that morning had now taken root, and it was growing fast, choking out any sense of reason. He dialed Ariana's number, his hand shaking as he pressed the phone to his ear. It rang once, twice, and then went to voicemail. He tried again, with the same result. Panic surged within him, followed closely by a burning rage. He needed to get home now. Throwing the car into gear, Justin spun it around and sped back toward the city, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind was a chaotic mess of emotions, disbelief, anger, hurt. But above all, there was a desperate need to know the truth. As he raced toward his house, another message came through. They're still there. You want hurry up, Justin. Justin's vision blurred as tears of rage and betrayal welled up in his eyes. He wiped them away, focusing on the road ahead. When he finally pulled into his driveway, he noticed how normal the house looked, as if nothing had changed. But he knew better. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Taking a deep breath, Justin got out of the car and walked to the front door. His hands shook as he unlocked it, the familiar creak of the hinges sounding ominous in the silence. The house was eerily quiet, but then he heard it, a faint sound, like water running. His heart sank. The jacuzzi. Every step he took felt like wading through thick mud. He made his way through the house, following the sound of the water, until he reached the patio door. It was slightly ajar, and steam was rising from the jacuzzi outside. He pushed the door open with a trembling hand, his heart pounding in his ears. And there they were. Here she is. Ariana and her boss, Richard, balls deep in our jacuzzi, fully naked, completely oblivious to his presence. Ariana was straddling him, their bodies intertwined in a way that made Justin's stomach churn. His mind screamed at him to look away, to run, but he was rooted to the spot, his eyes locked on the scene before him. What the fuck, bitch? Thought you were at work. Justin's voice exploded from his throat, raw and furious. Ariana's head snapped around, her eyes widening in shock. Oh my gosh, you. But she has no shame. Your tiny Johnson couldn't satisfy me, so I got him, she hissed, grinding against the boss. Shut up, you slut. Justin cut her off, his voice cold and sharp as he showed the hidden cameras set up long time ago. Good thing I have this all on film, every single detail. Now I can show this everyone. Richard, who had been smug and arrogant just moments before, suddenly looked like a deer caught in headlights. He pushed Ariana off him, fumbling for a towel as he tried to cover himself. Justin, listen, this isn't what it looks like, Richard stammered, but Justin wasn't having it. Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like, Justin said, his tone icy. And you know what? I think your wife would love to see this. With a flick of his thumb, Justin tapped the screen of his phone, initiating a live video call. Richard's face drained of all color as he realized what Justin was about to do. No, Justin, please, don't do this. Ariana pleaded, her voice shaking with desperation. But Justin's rage had reached its boiling point. The call connected, and within moments, the face of Richard's wife appeared on the screen. Her expression shifted from confusion to horror as she took in the sight of her husband, naked and exposed, in another woman's arms. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and fury. Justin's lips curled into a grim smile. "Just thought you should know what your husband's been up to," he said, his tone devoid of any sympathy. "Now we can all see the truth." The silence that followed was suffocating. On the screen, Richard's wife, Nancy, stared, her face contorted with disbelief and pain. Her eyes were wide, blinking rapidly as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. Her mouth opened and closed. Richard, usually so composed, was now a shadow of his former self, his face pale and drained of all confidence. Ariana, however, snapped out of her shock first. She scrambled out of the jacuzzi, her movements frantic. Grabbing her robe, she wrapped it around herself as though it could shield her from the mess she'd created. Her eyes darted between Justin and the phone, wide with panic, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. "Justin, please," she begged, tears welling up, threatening to spill over. "This isn't what it seems. I can explain," Justin scoffed, cutting her off with a bitter laugh. "Explain? What's there to explain, Ariana? You've been caught, plain and simple. There's no talking your way out of this." Nancy's voice, now icy and filled with contempt, broke the tension. "Richard," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument, "I want you out of my house tonight. Don't even think about coming back." "Nancy, please, let me," Richard began, his voice trembling, but Nancy's patience had run out. "Now," she snapped, her voice like a whip. Without waiting for a response, she hung up, leaving the screen blank and the room in an awkward, unbearable silence. Justin stood there, his heart pounding in his chest, staring at Ariana. He waited, hoping for some explanation that might make sense of the betrayal. But Ariana said nothing. Her eyes were cast down, her body shaking, completely unable to meet his gaze. Taking a deep breath, Justin fought to steady his voice, the emotions inside him threatening to boil over. "Ariana," he began, each word measured and strained, "I loved you. I trusted you. We had a life together, plans for the future. And you threw it all away for what? Some cheap thrill with your boss?" Ariana's tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks as she shook her head, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Justin. I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, you did," Justin said flatly, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on him. "And now, you're going to face the consequences." Ariana's sobs grew louder, her hands shaking as she tried to reach out to him. "Justin, please, don't do this. We can work through this." "We can," but Justin was done. His eyes, once filled with love for the woman in front of him, were now cold and distant. "There's nothing left to work through, Ariana," he said, his voice firm. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." He turned on his heel, his steps heavy as he walked toward the door. The weight of the moment bore down on him, but he refused to let it break him. Behind him, Ariana's sobs grew more frantic, but he didn't look back. As he reached the doorway, he paused, his hand resting on the doorframe. Without turning around, he spoke one last time, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hope it was worth it, Ariana." With that, Justin stepped out of the room, leaving her standing there, shattered and alone. The door closed behind him with a soft click, the sound echoing through the quiet house like a final, irrevocable sentence. The life they had built together was over, and there was no going back. Justin spent the next few days in a haze, his emotions swinging wildly from rage to despair to an overwhelming numbness. He couldn't stay in the house. The silence was unbearable, turning what was once a warm and welcoming home into a cold, empty shell. Ariana had left to stay with a friend, and Justin avoided any contact with her, not ready to face the reality of their shattered life. He tried to drown himself in work, staying late at the office, taking on every project he could. But no matter how busy he kept himself, the images haunted him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ariana and Richard in the jacuzzi, their betrayal like a knife twisting in his gut. He couldn't escape the torment of that image, or the memory of Ariana's voice as she chose her boss over him. The anger boiled inside him, simmering just beneath the surface. He knew he couldn't live like this, with the betrayal consuming him. Late one night, after hours of staring blankly at his computer screen, Justin reached for his phone. The urge to lash out, to make them pay, was almost too strong to resist. He could ruin their lives with a few taps. Send the video to Richard's wife, to their colleagues, even post it online. The thought of it brought a momentary rush of satisfaction. But as his finger hovered over the screen, a different thought crept in. Revenge might feel good in the moment, but it wouldn't heal the pain. It wouldn't erase the betrayal or bring back the trust that had been shattered. What good would it do to drag them down when he was still stuck in the same misery? Justin's hand trembled as he set the phone down. He realized he needed something more. Revenge alone wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't allow him to move forward. He needed to regain control of his life, to find a way to rebuild from the wreckage they had created. Sitting there in the dim light of his office, Justin began to think more clearly. He wouldn't let them destroy him. He wouldn't let the betrayal define him. Instead, he would focus on himself, on his own future. He needed a plan, not just to make them pay, but to ensure that he came out of this stronger, better, and in control of his own destiny. It was time to stop dwelling on the past and start looking toward the future. Justin stood up, the weight of the past few days still heavy on his shoulders, but with a new resolve hardening in his heart. He would get through this, on his own terms. He would find a way to turn this disaster into an opportunity. And in the end, he would be the one to come out on top. The next morning, Justin awoke with a sense of purpose that had been missing since the discovery of Ariana's betrayal. As he sipped his coffee, the bitterness on his tongue was mirrored by the bitterness in his heart, but for the first time, he felt a strange clarity. A plan began to take shape in his mind, one that was both risky and foolproof. He knew enough about Richard, Ariana's boss, to realize that the man had skeletons in his closet, skeletons that could be exposed with just the right push. Justin decided to start by taking control of his personal situation. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer, Paul Mitchell, a man known for his no-nonsense approach and sharp legal mind. When Paul answered, Justin didn't waste any time. "Paul, I need to talk to you about something serious," Justin began, his voice steady despite the turmoil he felt inside. "Ariana's been cheating on me with her boss, Richard. I've got proof, video evidence. I'm not looking for a long, drawn-out battle, but I want to make sure the divorce is on my terms and that my assets are protected." Paul was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Justin, I'm sorry to hear that, but you're doing the right thing by getting ahead of this. With the evidence you have, we can make sure you're in a strong position. I'll start drafting the necessary documents. We'll take this one step at a time." After hanging up, Justin felt a small weight lift from his shoulders. The legal part of his plan was in motion, but that was just the beginning. He needed to take things further, to ensure that Richard paid for what he had done, not just to Justin, but likely to others as well. Over the next few days, Justin used every resource at his disposal to gather information on Richard. As an IT specialist for a major tech firm, Justin had access to tools and systems that most people couldn't even imagine. He knew how to trace digital footprints, dig deep into someone's online activities, and uncover secrets buried under layers of encryption and security. He started by hacking into Richard's email accounts, sifting through years of correspondence. It didn't take long for the skeletons to start tumbling out of the closet. There were emails detailing shady business deals, thinly veiled threats to competitors, and even hints of embezzlement. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Richard had a pattern, a habit of preying on younger female employees, using his position of power to manipulate them into relationships. Justin found incriminating emails and texts, inappropriate photos, and even videos that Richard had foolishly stored on his cloud account. The man had been living a double life, and Justin was now holding the keys to his downfall. With a grim determination, Justin compiled everything into a comprehensive file. He organized the evidence meticulously, creating a dossier that included documentation of embezzlement, shady business practices, and a string of inappropriate relationships with female employees. He even found video evidence of Richard's interactions with other women at the company, videos that left little doubt about the man's true character. Justin knew that this information alone could destroy Richard's career, but he wasn't done yet. He wanted to make sure that Richard wouldn't just lose his job. He wanted to ensure that Richard would be unable to work in his industry ever again. He wanted to make Richard a pariah, someone whose name would be synonymous with scandal and disgrace. Once the file was complete, Justin sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. He had all the evidence he needed to bring Richard down. But before he moved forward, he needed to consider the timing. He didn't want to act rashly. He needed to make sure that when he struck, it would be with precision and finality. He decided to bide his time, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash the storm he had meticulously prepared. In the meantime, he would continue to gather more information, ensuring that there would be no escape for Richard once the plan was set into motion. As he closed his laptop, Justin felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in days, he wasn't just reacting to the betrayal. He was taking control of the situation. He had a plan, and soon, both Richard and Ariana would realize that they had underestimated him. Friday morning dawned, and Justin was already wide awake. His mind focused on the task ahead. He dressed with deliberate care, choosing his best suit as if preparing for a high-stakes negotiation. Today wasn't just about confronting Richard. It was about reclaiming control over his life. By the time he left the house, a steely determination had settled over him. When he arrived at Richard's office, Justin walked in with the kind of confidence that made people step out of his way. The receptionist glanced up, startled by his assertive demeanor. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" she asked, her voice faltering slightly. "No," Justin replied curtly, "but I'm sure Richard will want to see me." The receptionist hesitated, glancing at her computer screen. "He's in a meeting." "Not anymore," Justin cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. He strode past her, heading straight for the door marked with Richard's name. Inside, Richard sat at his desk, reviewing documents with a furrowed brow. When the door swung open, he looked up, surprise flickering across his face before it quickly twisted into anger. "Justin? What the hell are you doing here?" Justin didn't bother with a response. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out the thick file he had meticulously compiled over the past few days. Without a word, he tossed it onto Richard's desk, watching as the man's bravado faltered. Richard stared at the file, confusion giving way to dread as he slowly opened it. His eyes scanned the contents, emails, transaction records, photographs, all laid out in damning detail. The color drained from his face as he realized the full extent of what Justin had uncovered. "What is this?" Richard stammered, his hands shaking slightly as he flipped through the pages. "Everything I need to ruin you," Justin replied coldly, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I'm going to send this to your company's board of directors, to the press, and to every law enforcement agency that will listen. You'll be finished, Richard." For a moment, Richard was too stunned to respond. Then, his shock gave way to anger. He slammed the file shut and glared up at Justin. "You can't do this," he spat, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. "You don't know who you're messing with." Justin met his gaze, unflinching. "Oh, I think I do. And I'm not just doing this for me," he said, his voice steady. "I'm doing it for every woman you've manipulated, every person you've screwed over. You're done." Richard's bravado crumbled as the reality of the situation set in. The threat was real, and Justin held all the cards. His voice dropped to a pleading tone. "Justin, please," he begged, desperation seeping into every word. "There has to be another way. We can work something out. Anything?" Justin stared at him, unmoved. There was a time when he might have considered mercy, but that time had long passed. He leaned back slightly, arms crossed. "Here's what's going to happen," he began, his tone brokering no compromise. "You're going to resign from the company today. You're going to disappear from Ariana's life, and you're never going to contact her or me again. If you do, I'll send this file to everyone on my list." Richard looked utterly defeated. The confident facade he wore daily now shattered beyond repair. He slumped back in his chair, the fight draining out of him. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I'll do it. Just please, don't ruin me." Justin stood up, straightening his jacket. The sight of Richard, once so arrogant and self-assured, now reduced to this pathetic state, gave him no satisfaction, just a grim sense of closure. "You ruined yourself," Justin said, his voice firm and final. "I'm just making sure everyone knows it." Without another word, Justin turned and walked out of the office, leaving Richard behind to grapple with the fallout of his own actions. The confrontation was over, but the ripples of its consequences had only just begun. As Justin stepped out into the bright morning sun, he felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. The path ahead was still uncertain, but at least now, he was the one setting the course. The day after Richard resigned, the atmosphere at the office shifted. His departure was officially framed as a decision to pursue other opportunities, but the office buzzed with whispers. It wasn't long before rumors of financial misconduct and inappropriate behavior spread, fueling speculation. Richard's once untouchable reputation unraveled rapidly, turning him into a cautionary tale whispered behind closed doors. Justin heard the murmurs through the office grapevine, but he kept his distance, focusing on his work. He felt no satisfaction in Richard's downfall. It was simply the inevitable consequence of his actions. However, knowing that justice had been served in some form gave Justin a sense of closure. Meanwhile, Ariana was struggling. Her attempts to reach out to Justin were met with silence. Each unanswered call and unreturned text deepened the chasm between them. She had betrayed his trust in a way that words couldn't mend, and Justin made it clear that he had no interest in listening to her explanations or apologies. A week after Richard's departure, Ariana returned to their home to collect her belongings. As she stepped into the quiet house, the weight of her actions hit her full force. The life they had built together was gone, the warmth of their shared memories now replaced by cold emptiness. On the kitchen counter, she found the divorce papers. The sight of them sent a pang through her chest. There was no note, no final words from Justin, just the stark reality of their marriage's end laid out in legal terms. Her hands trembled as she picked up the papers, her eyes scanning the text, but the words blurred as tears welled up. Ariana knew she had lost everything: her marriage, her home, and the man she once believed she would spend her life with. She signed the papers without hesitation, knowing there was no point in dragging out the inevitable. Afterward, she gathered her things quickly, leaving the house as silently as she had entered, the sound of the door clicking shut behind her like the final punctuation on their relationship. For Justin, the days that followed were a blur of activity. He threw himself into his work with a renewed vigor, taking on challenging projects that kept him occupied. The late nights in the office became his new normal, a welcome distraction from the emotional wreckage that still lingered in the corners of his mind. The gym also became a sanctuary. Justin started working out more regularly, pushing his body to its limits as a way to channel his anger and hurt. Each drop of sweat, each muscle strain, was a step toward reclaiming control over his life. The physical exhaustion was a balm for the emotional turmoil, and slowly, the pain began to dull. Then, one evening as Justin was leaving the office, his phone buzzed with a new message. The number was unfamiliar, and he hesitated before opening it. The last time an unknown number had messaged him, it had shattered his world. But curiosity won out, and he clicked to open the text. It was Nancy. "Thank you for showing me the truth. I'm sorry for what you went through. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Justin stared at the message, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Nancy, Richard's wife, had been another casualty of the same betrayal that had destroyed his marriage. The fact that she had reached out to him, offering a hand of friendship and understanding, brought him a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. He typed a quick reply, expressing his thanks but keeping it brief. He wasn't sure what, if anything, would come from their shared experience, but the simple act of connection was enough for now. As he drove home that night, a calmness settled over him. The storm of the past few weeks had passed, leaving behind a landscape that was forever changed, but not unrecognizable. The wounds were still there, but they were healing, slowly but surely. The memories of betrayal would always linger, but they no longer held the power to consume him. Justin knew that he was ready to move forward. The future was an open road, and for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about what lay ahead. He had faced the darkness, walked through it, and come out the other side stronger. The scars from his ordeal would remain, but they were no longer a source of pain. Instead, they were reminders of his resilience, of the strength he had discovered within himself when everything else had fallen apart. And with that strength, Justin knew he could rebuild his life, shaping a future that was his alone. Months had passed since the turmoil, and Justin's life was gradually finding its rhythm again. The anger and sadness had receded, replaced by a steady focus on his work and a renewed sense of self. He had immersed himself in his job, taking on new challenges and embracing opportunities he had previously overlooked. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Justin walked through the park near his home, he felt a sense of contentment. The air was cool, and the leaves crunched beneath his feet. The park had become a favorite place for him, a sanctuary where he could clear his mind and reflect on his journey. As he strolled along the path, he heard a voice calling his name. He turned to see Nancy approaching, her face lit up with a warm smile. They hadn't seen each other since that initial exchange of messages, but the bond formed from their shared experience had remained. "Justin, hi," Nancy said, her voice cheerful and genuine. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," Justin responded with a smile. "It's good to see you." Nancy fell into step beside him, and they walked in companionable silence for a while. The park was quiet, the sounds of nature blending with the distant hum of city life. The changing leaves created a picturesque backdrop, adding a sense of tranquility to the moment. After a few moments, Nancy broke the silence. "How have you been, Justin?" Justin considered her question for a moment. "Better," he said. "It's been a journey, but I'm getting there. Slowly but surely." Nancy nodded, her expression one of understanding. "I know what you mean. It's not easy to move on, but here we are, still standing." Their conversation flowed naturally as they continued walking. They talked about their experiences, their work, and their plans for the future. There was a comfortable rhythm to their discussion, as if they were picking up where they had left off. As they walked, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the park. The world seemed to slow down, and Justin found himself appreciating the beauty of the moment. He glanced at Nancy, who was watching the sunset with a serene smile. For the first time in a long while, Justin felt at peace. The wounds from the past were healing, and he was starting to see a future full of possibilities. As they walked together into the twilight, he realized that he was open to what lay ahead. The pain of the past had made him stronger, and now he was ready to embrace new beginnings. Nancy turned to him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "You know, it's amazing how life can change so drastically. But sometimes, change brings new opportunities." Justin nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it does. And maybe there's something to be said for starting fresh." As they continued their walk, Justin felt a sense of hope. The future was no longer a daunting unknown, but a canvas waiting to be filled with new experiences. He didn't know what would come next, but he was ready to face it. Walking side by side, Nancy and Justin shared a quiet understanding. They both had endured their own struggles, but they had come through stronger. And as they reached the end of the park, Justin knew that this was the beginning of something new, something better. He glanced at Nancy, feeling a sense of optimism. For the first time in a long while, he felt ready to embrace whatever the future had in store.